Brutalism is an architectural style that features bold, structurally innovative forms that use raw concrete as raw material. Brutalist buildings, recognizable both their mass and materiality, often reveal the means of their construction through unfinished surfaces that bear the traces of the molds that formed them. Initially, the term brutalism was introduced by an architect from Sweden named Hans Asplund in 1949 to describe the design of Villa Goth in Uppsala. However, in 1996, Rainer Banham, an architectural critic, introduced the term brutalism in his publication The New Brutalism: Ethic or Aesthetic. He explained brutalism as a movement for giving a more monumental and heroic impression on the development of modern architecture. Finally, this publication makes the term brutalism famous throughout the world. Meanwhile, as a work, Brutalism Architecture was popularized by Le Corbusier through his work Unite the Habitation in 1952 and the Secretariat Building, Palace of Assembly in Chandigarh, India, 1953. In the mid-20th century, the architecture of brutalism achieved its glory along the World War II because at the time, cheap construction methods were needed. The impact of the war left a lot of polemics. Crises occurred everywhere until finally the English nation first sparked an education strategy by building 2,500 schools using prefabrication system. Until the mid-1950s, the truth of material remained important teaching of the architecture of brutalism, which manifested itself as an obsessive concern for the expressive articulation of mechanical and structural elements. In terms of shape, brutalism-style buildings are usually formed with repetitive modular elements to form masses that represents certain functional zones. Concrete is used to symbolize honesty and simplicity. Cast concrete surface shows the basic properties of construction and exposes the texture of the wooden boards used. Building materials of brutalism include bricks, glass, steel, and chisels. However, it does not mean that all buildings with exposed concrete exterior can be considered as having a brutal style. Brutalism as an architectural philosophy is often also associated with socialist ideologies that tend to be supported by designers, such as Allison and Peter Simpson. This style had strong place in socialist, communist European architecture in mid-1965 and 1989. Countries such as Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, the Soviet Union, and Yugoslavia are countries which are closely related to brutalism. Although the brutal movement was considered dead in the mid-1980s, today many buildings with concrete facades have been built. Although most are made in a more subtle style, this renewal was also carried out, one of them in the renovation of several buildings in the style of brutality itself today have been registered as cultural heritage buildings. It is considered as an appreciation of the brutalism journey in the world of architecture. Today, brutalism is still chosen as an architectural style even though an architect has no problem with the budget. This happens because the style of brutalism is considered as a style that has honesty, natural and anti-burga concrete. And brutality eventually developed in Japan. Tandao Ando, an architect who has a vision in marking work by processing concrete into freestanding frame into a parapet wall, is one of the carries of this concept. His work is a reflection and important process of creating buildings for living things. Uchi Panashi, resignation for exposed concrete style in Japan, is considered as a work that symbolizes modernity, authenticity, and honesty in the developments in contemporary architectural studies.
Just like the concept of brutality that occurred in the era of 50s, Ando also wanted to show the natural impression of a building. Ando has a large role in the development of concrete and contemporary brutalism in Japan. Through his works, one proof of its influence is the 1995 the Pritzker Architecture Prize, which he received for his success in creating extraordinary works and science for the future of architecture. In his work, we can see how he processes concrete elements and combines them with natural lighting effects. The Chapel of the Light has a cold, narrow, and dim atmosphere with the dominance of exposed concrete. Then, in the darkness, the light of the cross appears from a hollow wall, as a statement that the symbol gives light to its adherents, so that a sense of solemnity can be created when we enter the building. Just as Peter Zumthor said in his book, Where Material Can Tell More Than a Culture, Tadao Ando has succeeded in doing that in his work. The concrete building he founded was able to tell stories and form a perception for people who entered into it. In Indonesia, architect Andra Matin also developed a style of brutality in his works. The wooden sills and wooden windows of Mandura second-hand stalls can become one of the most luxurious restaurants in Jakarta. The game of cross-ventilation is one of the important elements in Andra Matin's design. In addition, the composition of ironwood material with a concrete frame is one of its another characteristic, as seen in the private house and Hitas Salihara building he designed. Some of his works are difficult to digest only from two-dimensional images. He uses a minimalist lines with geometric structures that feel the same, and the division of the room level that gives the impression of being connected between one level with another level. Many consider that Anda Matin can succeed in creating self-identity and pride in the architecture he designed. According to him, aesthetics are honesty and balance. By displaying the material as it was originally, without finishing, he considered it as honesty. As well as balance, he regards as yin and yang, which are contemporary things, such as it looks not finished outside, but actually, when entering the building, it is finished perfectly. He has a vision to always be dynamic and add newness. Andra Matin always wants to make everything in detail, from the largest to the smallest, to create things that are different from the others. Such was the vision he had. His success in designing can be seen from the awards he has received, one which is the coronation as one of the 101 most active architects in the world in 2007. In Indonesia alone, he is known as one of the architects in the contemporary era. from honesty and balance that he wanted to display through the material. The use of concept of brutality was born in many of his works.
The Brutalist architectural movement was born in the European communist countries and became famous all over the world in the 1960s and 1970s. Those buildings constructed through Brutalist architecture had certain critics who defined this kind of buildings as piles of cement, while others embraced the designs admiring their unique aesthetic appeal. Brutalism is a trend derived from modern architecture, influenced mainly by the French architect like Le Corbusier, especially his large-scale projects such as the houses in Marseilles and Berlin, as well as the masterful architecture of Chandigarh in India. With the progressive decline of the modern movement, brutalism is becoming more and more common thanks to a simple and repetitive architecture made of raw materials that guarantees the possibility of creating great works at a reduced cost.
The origin of brutalism. Hans Sprans, a Swedish architect, first used the term brutalism in reference to architecture in 1949 to describe the Villa Gothic, a square brick house. Around this time, brutalism began formally and soon spread. The design was refined further by Allison and Peter Smithson before being adopted by English architects. They are best known for the East London Council housing estate known as Robin Hood Gardens. It was constructed from precast concrete slabs and finished in 1972. Although it was designed with the Smithson vision for ideal living, it never completely met those expectations. As part of a remodeling strategy, the eastern of block was destroyed in 2017, but the Victoria and Albert Museum purchased a piece of demonstrate how far brutalism has come.
Key elements of brutalism. Number 1, blocky, heavy appearance. Number 2, simple, graphic line. Number 3, lack of ornamentation. Number 4, utilitarian feels. Number 5, monochromatic palette. Number 6, use of raw exposed concrete and sometimes brick exterior. Number 7, rough unfinished surfaces. Number 8, use of modern materials such as steel, glass, stone, gabions. Number 9, small windows. Number 10, modular elements.
Example of brutalism. Number 1. Giselle Library. The late 1960s saw the creation of Giselle Library on the 100-acre campus of UC San Diego by American architect William Pereira. The 80-story building, which is made completely of glass and concrete, was built atop a pedestal that has grown to be regarded as very iconic by residents. Pereira added elements of space, age modernism, and futurism to the instantly recognizable brutalism, pushing the peaceful coastal city into a more modern setting. Number 2. The Wutruba is a church in the capital of Austria that was designed by a local artist named Fritz Wutruba. He created the sculptural church, which has constructed between 1974 and 1976. They resemble a collection of blocks that has haphazardly stacked on the top of one another. Reflective glass is used to cover the crevice between the plain blocks, allowing light to enter the interior. Number 3. Palika Kendra Building, one of the tallest structures in the Indian capital up until recently, was the 1984 Palika Kendra Building, which was designed by Mahendra Raj and Kuldeep Singh. It one of the city's few brutalist structures, standing at approximately 300 feet. The New Delhi Municipal Council is currently housed in the noteworthy architectural building. Number 4. Maison de l'UNESCO. Many architects, including the originator of the renewed architectural style, Marcel Breuer, profoundly embraced brutalism, but few did it with such grace. The Breuer designs UNESCO headquarters, also known as the Maison de l'UNESCO in Paris, was inaugurated in November 1958. It is a cube-shaped structure meant for permanent delegation and non-governmental organizations. French architect Bernard Serfus and Italian architect Pierluigi Nervi each created two extra structures. Number 5. Barbican Centre and State at London, built at 1982 and architect by Chamberlain Powell and Bond, located in one of the most pumped-out areas of London, rising from the ashes and debris of World War II. Is this massive art center and housing development, huge in scale and complexity, it's confusing and fascinating, beautiful and inspiring. At the time it was built, it was radical to grant pedestrian as much important as the automobile. I have personally been lost in its modern constellation of corridor, walkways, skybridge, and tunnels more than once, and loved every minute of the compilation. The housing estate and tower were opened first, but huge art center wasn't finished until 1982 when it was christened by Queen Elizabeth herself. The goal was to house people in well-designed architectural significance while surrounding them with the utopian fantasy, art and culture all during busy London. In 2000, the Barbican was voted London's ugliest building. These days, however, you would be hard-pressed to find any London architecture list that doesn't include it, usually near the top. Number 6. The Bank of London and South America. Location, Buenos Aires. Year built, 1966. And architect, Clorinda Testa and Sepra. One aspect of brutalism that often overlooked is the airy interior. For obvious reason, architecture critics and fans alike tend to fetishize the hulking exterior of this behemoth rather than the grandly spacious halls that are created by all cold, hard concrete. The brutalist exterior is all about heaviness, but inside, as you see here, a certain lightness abounds. Bulsa comes up again and again on lists and overview about brutalism. It's hard to ignore. It was included in an international traveling exhibition that celebrates the 20th century most important work of architecture. Number 7 is Pominic Memorial. Location throughout the former Yugoslavia. Year built 1950 to 2000. This late Soviet era memorials, some of which were built to commemorate the Yugoslavian people fight against Axis occupation during World War II, are hugely appealing. The monumental structures stand as remembrance and symbols of unity for that nation. Through these days, these mostly seem to be appreciated for their otherworldly sculptural strangeness. Call it brutalism as fully. There are hundreds of these scattered across the countrysides designed by different architects in the second half of the 20th century. While some of these are the size of building, others are just barely as tall as human.
Number 8. Geisel Library. Location: La Jolla, California. Year built 1970. Architects: William L. Pereira and Associates. For fans of both Brutalism and Dr. Seuss, there's only one building that matters: Geisel Library. Named after local La Jolla author and benefactor Theodore Seuss, Geisel the library is that somewhat unlikely home to a vast collection of Dr. Seuss drawings, books, audio recordings, and memorabilia. Over 8,500 items in all, plus a large bronze statue of the cat in the hat that greets visitors. Architect William Pereira was the creator of a many memorable building, especially in California. The Transamerica Pyramid Tower in San Francisco, CBS Television's City in Hollywood, and Pepperdine University in Malibu, to name a few. The unique futuristic design is representative of hands, displaying concrete piers, holding up books, the glass in floors. Number 9. The Cathedral of St. Mary of the Assumption. Location: San Francisco. Year built 1970. Architects: Pier Luigi Nervi and Pietro Belluschi. The great Italian engineer-architect Pier Luigi Nervi was a master of concrete as much as Picasso was a master of paint. His work is rare in the US, yet this is his most exciting and important structure. It's also one of the few entries on this list that I dare say is even better viewed from the inside. I'm not sure how ecclesiastic you will find the interior space. I find it deliciously menacing, one of the most dramatic interior spaces ever created, enough to make me believe more in the power of art and engineering than in the power of the Who had supposedly risen. Nervi pushed the limits of reinforced concrete to the extreme. Maybe when visiting here, we all should believe in God for safety reasons alone. Given the extreme, logic-defying cantilevers and load-bearing obstructions on display. Number 10. Trellick Tower. Location: London. Year built 1972. Architect: Ernio Goldfinger. London was ground zero for brutalism because housing was in short supply after World War II, and tall concrete towers were an expedient way to shelter large numbers of people. Trellick was once reviled, but it's now trendy and sought after, respected in a cultish way. Though most of the units are still firmly held for social housing, when flats become available, they sell quickly. A 3-bedroom was recently on the market for just over $1 million. According to the legend, the architect of the towers, Ernio Goldfinger, was such a tyrant to work for and his creations so menacing and unappealing that Ian Fleming named one of his most infamous villains after him. Number 11. Hill of the Buddha. Location: Sapporo, Japan. Year built 2015. Architect: Tadao Ando. From Tadao Ando, the modern master of concrete, comes this installation at the Makumanay Takino Cemetery, whose centerpiece is a giant stone representation of the Buddha. The statue already existed on site, but Ando decided to do partially hide it inside a gently sloped artificial hill. Only the top half of the head peeks out through the open oculus. To be honest, I'm not completely sure what it's all about, but it's sure cool in the summer. The hill is covered with purple flowers. In the winter, mostly snow. The over 44-foot tall Buddha is approachable on foot through a series of Brutalism water features, a prayer hall, tunnels, and walkways. This is monumentally skilled land, art, and architecture. Reused sculpture and landscaping of the highest order. Number 12. Boston City Hall. Location, Boston. Year built, 1969. Architects, Kallman and McKinnell and Knowles. Boston City Hall is a polarizing a piece of architecture as it exists in America. For years, it has been lambasted, the concrete whipping boy of Boston. There have been almost yearly cries to tear it down, even as it continually makes best of architecture lists. Number 13. The Met Brewer. Location, New York City. Year built, 1966. Architect, Marcel Breuer. When he was at the famous German art school, the Bauhaus, Marcel Breuer invented the series of steel tubular frame furniture pieces that have become modernist icons and are still in production today. His architectural efforts are equally revered. This inverted ziggurat made of concrete and granite was, and still is, one of the most avant-garde buildings in Manhattan. Widely disliked when it opened as the Whitney Museum of American Art in 1966, it has since been cited as one of the Brewer's best works and a definitive example of the Brutalist movement. Despite all the masterpieces that have passed through its doors, the building itself continues to be a star.
Here are some interesting facts about Brutalism. Number 1. Trellick Tower in London, a 31-story Brutalist apartment complex built in 1972 and now designated as a landmark, was created by architect Erno Goldfinger. Although not everyone is a fan of Goldfinger's work, he was one of the most modernist architects hired to rebuild and replenish London's housing supply after the devastation of World War II. Goldfinger's aesthetic was so despised by James Bond author Ian Fleming that he inspired creation of the Bond's arch-enemy in his honor. Number 2. Location of brutalist structure are frequently used in movies, television show about urban dystopias. Number 3. An outgrowing of modernism is brutalism.